Well, happy birthday because your dreams have come true. We now get to talk about taxes. Be honest with me. Raise your hand if, when you see the word taxes and you know that you're about to hear about it, you think to yourself, this is going to be a combination of confusing and boring. It's okay if that's what you think. That's what everybody thinks. And the reason is because taxes can be extremely confusing. And also, we're taught to view taxes as just one of the mandatory parts of life. What are the two things that are guaranteed in life? Death and taxes, right? You've heard that so much. The two things that are guaranteed to happen in life are you're going to die and you're going to pay taxes. Well, that's interesting. Isn't it interesting that you hear this and you just take it for granted that we're going to have to pay all these taxes? And yet there are wealthy people who we see stories about who pay zero in taxes, but they're not in prison. Interesting. There's either something crazy and corrupt going on, or they know something that we don't. And so let's at least explore the idea that learning about taxes can be fun, can be sexy, and can be empowering. Because I'm going to tell you this, and I want you to remember it, even if you don't believe it, just at least remember it. Mitigating taxes, minimizing your taxes can be the most powerful accelerant to financial freedom that you ever do. And that's a powerful statement. And I'm going to back it up. As you go through this course, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to talk about examples of people who have dramatically increased their velocity toward financial freedom by reducing the ball and chain that's dragging them back in the form of taxes. So first, though, let's talk about what taxes are and how they work. Just remember this one thing. Taxes are the number one expense in your entire life, and it's not even close. If I were to have asked you if I were to just survey a group of average Americans and say, what are the biggest expenses throughout the course of your lifetime? They would probably say housing, they'd probably say food and clothing, things like that, right? The taxes might break the top five, but most people don't see them for what they actually are. Normally, the way you're hit with taxes is you have the one that everybody knows, federal income tax. Then you typically have state income tax. A lot of military will have, homestead exemptions, like they'll be able to claim a home of record in a state that doesn't have income tax. I know I did whenever I was in, and so that's great. So you don't have to pay state income tax, and everybody knows that California charges a lot in taxes. So sure, California is one that charges high state income tax. Tennessee, for instance, does not charge state income tax. But federal income tax is something that it's like the number one thing that we all know. It's going to be taken out of our paycheck, right? Then you have what's called the FICA, which are Social Security and Medicare. Social Security is just a tax that's taken out was originally meant to create a fund where when you reach a certain age, you're able to get that money back. So they take that money out of your paycheck over the course of your working life. And the idea is when you hit a certain age, you can then draw on Social Security to essentially help you into retirement years. That's how it was set up initially, at least. Medicare is similar, only it's for medical reasons. Social Security you get and you can just spend on anything. Medicare is really meant for paying your medical bills as you get older because your medical bills are going to become much higher as you get older. Okay, that's your down and dirty. Oh, boring. Who cares? You still got to know it. The reason that I want you guys to know these is because I want you to be able to identify areas where you can minimize the amount of taxes that you have to pay legally, 100% legally. Okay. What you don't think of, though, are all of the other taxes that you pay, and that is taxes on gas, it's airport tax, it's you buy a car, you have to pay taxes on it. You pay property taxes. You pay taxes on any type of interest that you make. You pay taxes on groceries. You pay taxes on cigarettes. You pay taxes on everything. Everything that you can think of is taxed. Everything. So when you add it all up together, there's actually a report that was done identifying how much aggregate taxes the average American pays, and it's upwards of 50%. It's over 50% of every dollar that you make is paid in some form of tax. So imagine that you're making $50,000 a year. Gross. That's what you're making gross. You're not living off $50,000 a year. You're living off of $25,000 a year because half of it goes toward taxes. But imagine this. Imagine if you were able to structure your life to where you minimized your tax rate down from 50 to say 20. That extra 30% that you're not using to live right now would essentially go into your pocket. And that's what the wealthy do, the wealthy minded. That's what you do is you create a life situation. You create a situation where you have all of these different legal write-offs and all of this structure to minimize your taxes. And what it does is it takes that stream of money that's coming into your life that's being siphoned off by taxes. That stream of money grows bigger and bigger and bigger because the siphon of taxes is smaller and smaller. That's the idea. And that's why it's important to understand how taxes work so that you can minimize them. And by the way, the tax code is set up. You may have never heard this before. I'm probably going to blow your mind with this. The tax code is actually written to incentivize you to minimize your taxes. The tax code is written with all of these different what are called loopholes, where essentially you can do things that the government wants you to do anyway, and they incentivize you to do those things by allowing you to take tax deductions. For instance, if you have a house, the government wants to create a stable environment for their citizens. That's one of the mandates of a government. And so they know that if they incentivize millions of individual Americans to provide clean, safe, affordable living conditions in the form of rental properties that are maintained, that have good running water, that have security systems and so on, if they incentivize you to provide that, then we will be able to do a much better job collectively than the government could with a program. Stick with me here. So, as a real estate investor, if I buy a rental property, guess what? I can deduct taxes off of any maintenance, off of any, capital expenditures, renovations that I do. I can deduct my mortgage interest. I can deduct any travel expenses whenever I'm traveling to and from, and I can deduct property management and on and on and on and on. There are so many deductions that are wrapped into rental properties that I'm able to essentially pay almost no tax on rental income. And you too. That's the way it's set up. So understand this. Not only does the government allow you to minimize your tax burden, they actually want you to minimize your tax burden by doing all of those things that allow you to take the write-offs. It is, in my opinion, your patriotic duty to minimize your taxes by finding and taking advantage of the opportunities to build wealth while simultaneously minimizing your taxes. It's more patriotic than just working and paying the maximum taxes and making the government do all the work. That's just my own personal opinion. Take it or leave it. However, what I do know is that the tax code is written to maximize your write-offs whenever you're doing the things that the government wants you to do. So, what the heck is withholding? Here's how it's structured. And I'm going to speed up a little bit, okay? Because this isn't really supposed to be a tax lecture. It's supposed to give you the basics. But withholding, here's how it works for most people. You have a job. You have a W-2 income. In the case of military, a leave and earning statement. They will identify how much they need to hold back from your paycheck and keep in reserve to pay taxes. So they withhold a certain amount throughout the year that you don't ever see. And that withholding is paid to the government in the form of taxes. What no one tells you is that you don't actually owe those taxes throughout the year, typically. You owe those taxes by the start of the next year. And so what you're essentially doing by withholding is you're just giving the government a tax-free, interest-free loan. You're giving the government an interest-free loan throughout the year. And what most people hope for is a large income tax return. That's it, right? The standard deal is I work, I, have money withheld from my paycheck, and then at the end of the year, I file taxes, and hopefully I get a big return. That's what withholding is. What you're going to come to understand is that instead of giving all of your money to the government in form of taxes and overpaying them to the point where you get a big return, What is a much more financially savvy way to do it is to minimize the amount that you pay them to begin with. Within the law, you minimize the amount that you pay them, and at the end of the year, you should be not getting a return, and you should not be having to pay anything more. That's the next level of how to do it. And then there are other people who, plan even further, and they will actually try to they just pull that part out. So that's what withholding is. But the question is, how much tax do I have to legally pay? A lot of people don't ever ask that question. They just assume that someone else will calculate for them how much they need to pay, and that's how much they pay. And so they don't even think about it. But when you start asking the question, how much do I have to legally pay? Then you start identifying areas where you can minimize the amount of tax that you pay. Okay. And then what can I do to minimize the taxes? There are lots and lots of resources that are available that we will give you access to, YouTube videos and books and things like that that'll teach you how to grow a small business and teach you how to minimize your taxes. But the real secret sauce is having a small business, which as we go into the next module, you'll learn how to set that up. You'll learn how to create that. But having a small business allows you to unlock a massive amount of write-offs that you normally would just be paying for. But instead, you can get all of those write-offs and you can lower your tax burden and pay minimal in taxes just for having a small business. Okay? I understand that right now your head may be swimming with all of this. So what I would recommend is watch the video again so that you can kind of get a grasp, at least through repetition, what I'm talking about whenever I talk about taxes. And then look at the supplemental materials. We have some very, very clear breakdowns and videos that show you how it works in your life and what you can do to minimize taxes by creating a small business. Okay? All right. Let's talk about the dollar. And I'm going to speed up a little bit because I'm just trying to hit the basics here and then give you guys a little bit of a snapshot into how you think about it, how you can think about the dollar. You can think about taxes. You can think about all of these different basics in a different way. That's the point of all of this, is to teach you how the world looks at it, and then to show you how wealthy-minded people look at this exact same thing in a different way. And it changes the way you interact with it all. So how does money work? Just remember this one thing. Money itself doesn't matter. What you do with the money is what matters. Having $1 million in the bank doesn't do anything to change your life whatsoever until you put it to work. And so that's why I look at money as essentially potential energy. Money is just potential energy. It has no value in and of itself. It doesn't make you a better person. It doesn't make you evil. It doesn't do anything. Money is just money. It's just a tool. It is just an enabling function to help you make decisions and take advantage of opportunities and create abundance in your life and create impact in other people's lives. Money is an incredibly powerful tool. Don't get me wrong. I'm not minimizing money. It's a phenomenally powerful tool. One of the most powerful tools in the world, but it's just that. It's just a tool. So if you can start looking at it that way and remove the emotional impact of money and remove the ego-driven sort of, oh, if I become a millionaire, I'll all of a sudden be a better person. No, you won't. You'll be the same person you are right now, just you'll have a magnified ability to do things in the world. That's it. Money is just potential energy. When you see it like that, then you rob it of some of the stigma that comes along with money. A lot of people are really uncomfortable talking about money, my family included. A lot of people around you are like, you can't ask somebody how much money they make, or you shouldn't really talk about how much something costs, because there are people out there that just brag and, they just want everybody to know how much money they have. And nobody likes that. Nobody wants to be around that. And I agree, I don't either. But the way it's incredibly important, though, to be able to talk about money without giving it more power than it actually has. Because if you're not comfortable talking about money, you're not going to be comfortable dealing with money. And you have to get full comfort and control over money in order to make it work for you to create abundance in your life. So just that first bullet, money's potential energy, is really just about helping you rob it of any type of authority that it doesn't deserve. It is a tool that you use, and you should learn to talk freely about it and to talk openly about it and to not give it any more power than it actually has. Number two, inflation. What the heck is inflation? I'm not going to get into economics 101. What I will tell you about inflation is how it impacts your money. As inflation goes up, the purchasing power of your dollar goes down. That's it. So why is this important? Because with money sitting in a checking account, it's typically not making any money itself. It's just sitting there stagnant. That money, if you have $100 and it's, say today worth $100, great. But if inflation happens over the course of the next year, and let's just say 10% for easy math, it inflates 10%. Well, your $100 has lost 10% purchasing power. You need more money to buy the same thing that you could before. The reason that this is important is because understanding how inflation works, or understanding, more importantly, the impacts that it has, will allow you to make the decisions to place your money into things that are inflation hedges. And this is just me personally. This is how I use inflation and my knowledge of it to make decisions. I like to put my money into things that are inflation hedges, and to understand what the government is going to do whenever inflation runs away. So understand how powerful it is. Most people don't know this, but one of the key contributing factors to the fall of ancient Rome was inflation. Yeah, sure, they got eventually taken down by divisive, internal politics and like external combat forces. But what weakened them systematically over the course of a decade was inflation. A lot of people don't realize that, but the government does, politicians do, United States president does. And so whenever inflation gets too high, the Fed chairman and the president come together and they say, we need to do stuff. And a lot of times what they do is they'll raise interest rates or something like that. Well, why is that important to us? Because whenever interest rates go up, we can buy less real estate. It's more expensive to borrow money when interest rates go up. When interest rates are going down, it becomes less expensive to borrow money. And so you can make different moves based off of that. I'm not going to get too nerdy about that. I just wanted to understand inflation's bad, right? So what can we do? Well, guess what? When inflation goes up, so do the cost of real assets, like, for instance, rental properties. Whenever inflation goes up and it takes more money to buy the same thing, the value of your property tends to go up as well. Guess what else goes up? The value of your rent. So you typically can charge more rent when inflation has reduced the power of the dollar. You can typically charge more for the sale of a house. And guess what? Any mortgage that you have, this is the beautiful part. This is why real estate is a triple inflation hedge. The rental real estate, triple inflation hedge. As inflation goes up, so does the value of your home. As inflation goes up, so does the rent you can charge on your home. And the mortgage that you have on that home, you're able to pay off with cheaper dollars, meaning the power of that mortgage is diminished as well. So it's a triple inflation hedge. That's the only thing that I would say you need to remember about inflation is you want to put your money into assets that hedge against inflation, and also understand what the Fed's response is typically going to be for lowering or increasing inflation. The time value of money. Okay, not to belabor this too much, but the time value of money is essentially an understanding that today's dollars are worth more than tomorrow's dollars. And the reason they are is two primary reasons. One, we just talked about it, inflation. If I have $100 right now, 5 years from now, my $100 is probably going to buy less, which means if I put it to work right now, then it has more power than if I wait and just leave it in the bank and put it to work 5 years from now, right? So you want to take action. Time is the most important and powerful part of this financial freedom journey, time. So the sooner that you can start acting, the sooner you can take advantage of time. And the second part of the time value of money is its earning potential. If I have $100 sitting in a checking account right now, and I leave it in that checking account for the next 5 years, it has gained no money. It's earned me $0. But if I instead put it into an index fund or a piece of real estate or whatever, that money is now working for me. So if it gains 10% every year, just for easy math, if it gains 10%, right now I put in, it's $100. Next year, it'll be 110. After that, it will be 10% of 110, right? So that's now is a good time to talk about the compound interest. And compound interest is so unbelievably powerful that Albert Einstein is famous for saying that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, said by Albert Einstein, generally considered the smartest human in history. So, if he thinks it's so powerful that it should be considered the eighth wonder of the world, shouldn't we talk about it for a few minutes? Compound interest, what does it mean? It means that when you get say a 10% interest, it could be any number, but let's say it's 10% interest on something, and you can consistently get that year after year, then your money will not grow linearly. It'll grow exponentially. So let's say you have $100 and you can get 10% interest on it with an investment. I invest it today. It makes me 10% over the course of a year. At the end of the year, how much do I have? I have $110. Okay? The guy who put it in a savings account has $100 at the end of the year because it didn't make any money. The guy who put it into that investment has 110. So this guy has 100, this guy now has 110. Okay, that's great. But what about when it compounds? Compound means another layer on top of. So let's say it goes the second year. This guy started with $100 because he didn't make any money. This guy started with 110. So this $100 continues on, doesn't make any money. At the end of the second year, it's still worth 100. This 110 makes 10%. What's 10% of 110? $11. So that 110 becomes 121. So now after 2 years, this guy still has 100. This guy has 121. Okay? Now, if that's not sexy enough for you, just add zeros. Same thing happens at $1,000. Same thing happens at $100,000. This guy has 100 grand sitting in a checking account. This guy has 100 grand getting 10% interest. At the end of the year, this guy has 110,000. He's made $10,000. This guy's made zero. At the end of the second year, this guy now has 121,000. He's made $21,000. Literally doing nothing, just having the money work for him. Do you get it? The wealthy-minded people, the reason there's such a gap between wealth and poor, the reason that the rich get richer is because they have assets that are working for them, compounding in interest. That's what you've heard. You make money while you sleep. Making money while you sleep is the secret to getting wealthy. And compound interest is the secret to financial freedom. Because time, you start with $100, 100,000, who cares, right? You get the interest, but then you leave it in there. You don't use it to buy a car. You don't use it to buy booze or to buy a vacation or whatever. You leave it in there and let it compound and grow. And after 3, 4, 5 years of this thing compounding, all of a sudden you've got $200,000. And now that $200,000 is making 20 grand a year. And then it grows, and soon it's 300,000, and now it's making $30,000 a year of interest and interest and interest. And when it grows like that, you can turn hundreds of dollars you contribute $100 a month or several $100s a month, and over time, over the course of your life, you can make millions and millions off of compound interest. It's crazy how powerful it is. And again, if you don't really understand this, just go back and listen to it again. Start getting it in your mind. Start thinking about it in these kinds of terms, because I promise you, you'll start catching on after a while, and it'll start bleeding into your decisions throughout the day. You'll be like, man, I've got so much money in this checking account. I learned that first I need to pay off my credit card debt. Okay, so I'm paying off my credit card debt. Now I'm not getting that, high interest pulling me away, but I've also now got a bunch of money sitting in a checking account. And I remember what Buddy said about inflation destroying that money. And also with the time value of money, I got to put this money to work. Otherwise, it's not doing anything. Oh, and by the way, if I can get a good interest rate on it and I can let it keep growing and compounding, then that will rapidly accelerate my path to financial freedom. All I want you to do right now is remember these concepts and get them stuck in your head. There is no replacement for time when it comes to building financial freedom. Time is the number one power player. So just remember that. And as you make financial decisions, keep these bullet points in mind. Okay, Next video, we're going to go over assets and we're going to go over liabilities. What are assets and what are liabilities? We're going to take them bit by bit and talk about the different areas of your life where you may have assets and how to treat them, where you may have liabilities and how to treat them. Okay, so get prepared for that. But understand the one final point on money, and that is compounding interest works for you and it can help you build financial freedom. But you also have to pay attention to the fact that the banks and lenders and credit agencies, they know this. And guess what they're doing? They're using compound interest to build wealth for themselves. How do they do that? By charging you interest on your credit cards and compounding it. Imagine if you have $1,000 on a credit card and they're charging you 16%. 16%. They charge you a 16% APR at the end of the month, and they tack it onto your credit card balance, and they only require you to pay a small portion of it as a minimum payment. And now they have a bigger balance that they then tack more interest on the next month and more interest the next month. And so they're using compound against you. They're using compound interest to build financial freedom themselves, but they're doing it at your expense. So that is another reason you have to understand these things, they're just tools, just like fire. You can use fire to cook a steak or you can use it to burn your house down. Just like a knife, you can use a knife to cut your steak or you can use a knife to kill someone. It's these things, assets, liabilities, debt, income, capital, whatever you want to call all of these things, taxes, all of these things, they're just tools. And understand that if you can use it for yourself, then you essentially are acting like the wealthy. You're thinking like the wealthy, and you will become wealthy if you do it. But you got to remember that that same game is being played against you when it comes to credit card companies and things like that. So understand how to mitigate the compounding interest that's attacking you and how to capitalize on it and employ it in your own life to build financial freedom. All right, I'll see you in the next video.